stood in the docking bay of the human warship and tried not to show his unease. The metal walls were covered in strange markings and symbols that his translator could not interpret. Loud sounds echoed through the corridors. Humans rushed past him carrying equipment and weapons, their voices raised in what seemed like constant argument. This was nothing like the clean, orderly vessels of the fleet. A human approached him. The man was tall and wore a dark uniform with colored bars on his chest. His hair was cut very short and gray lined the sides. His face showed deep lines around his eyes and mouth. "You must be officer," the human said. His voice was rough but not unfriendly. "I'm Captain Jack. Welcome aboard the Valiant." Raised his hand in the human greeting gesture he had studied. "Thank you, Captain. I am honored to serve with the Coalition forces." Smiled, showing his teeth. Knew this was a friendly expression for humans, though it looked aggressive to eyes. "Come on. I'll show you around and introduce you to the command team." As they walked through the ship, noticed everything. The humans moved with purpose but without the careful precision of his own people. They laughed loudly. They touched each other often, placing hands on shoulders or arms. In one corridor, two humans were engaged in what looked like a physical fight, but others simply walked past without concern. "Training exercise," explained when he saw watching. "Hand-to-hand combat drills. The crew stays sharp." Nodded but did not understand why they practiced such primitive fighting methods. Modern warfare happened at great distances with advanced weapons. Close combat was nearly extinct in civilized military forces. They entered a large room filled with display screens and control stations. Several humans worked at various posts, gestured to a woman with dark hair pulled back from her face. "This is Lieutenant Amy Brooks. She commands our Marine Ground Force." Brooks turned and studied with sharp blue eyes. She was smaller than but moved with controlled grace. "Good to meet you, officer. Hope you're ready for some action. We don't do much sitting around here." Before could respond, another human approached. This one was younger with brown hair and carried several data tablets. "Commander Fletcher," said, "Tactical Operations." Fletcher nodded at. "Heard a lot about strategic methods. Looking forward to working with you. We could use some of that famous analytical thinking." Felt a small surge of pride. At least these humans recognize superiority in military theory. "I hope to contribute meaningfully to our combined efforts." The last introduction was to a woman in a different uniform. She wore white instead of the dark colors of the others. "Dr. Lisa Canton, Chief Medical Officer," said. Canton smiled warmly. "I've been reading about physiology. Fascinating stuff. If you need anything, medical or otherwise, come find me." Noticed that her eyes held genuine kindness. Perhaps not all humans were as crude as he had expected. Led him to a quiet corner of the command center. "Let me be straight with you. We're glad to have support, but this isn't going to be an easy fight. They don't follow any rules. They hit colonies, kill civilians, and don't take prisoners. We've lost a lot of good people already." Had read the reports. They were a savage species that rejected all diplomatic contact. They appeared without warning and left only destruction. "The Coalition will stop them," said with confidence. "Combined, we have superior technology and numbers." His expression changed. Something dark moved behind his eyes. "Technology and numbers matter, sure, but this kind of war requires something else too." Before could ask what he meant, an alarm sounded throughout the ship. The lights changed to a red color. All the humans immediately moved to their stations with swift efficiency. "What's happening?" asked. Fletcher was already pulling up data on the main display. "Distress signal, human colony on Pershing 4. They're under attack." The screen showed information flooding in. Video feeds displayed burning buildings and fleeing people. Felt his stomach tighten at the images of destruction. Studied the tactical display. "How many ships?" "Reading 6 heavy cruisers and multiple smaller craft," Fletcher reported. They've got orbital superiority. Ground forces are already on the planet. Our fleet strength, asked. We can pull together 4 ships including the Valiant. 2 more could join us in 6 hours. Did the calculations quickly. Captain, we would be outnumbered. Standard protocol suggests we wait for additional forces before engaging. Looked at the screen showing the colony. More buildings were exploding. Could see small figures running. Some fell and did not get up. Those people don't have 6 hours. But the tactical disadvantage began. Is noted, cut him off. His voice was firm but not angry. Brooks, get your Marines ready for ground deployment. Fletcher, coordinate with the other ships. We're going in. The command center erupted into controlled chaos. Every human knew exactly what to do. Orders were given and followed without hesitation. Brooks passed near on her way out. You're coming with my unit, officer. Captain wants you to observe human ground operations firsthand. Felt a chill run through his body. He had trained in military theory but had never seen actual combat. Conflicts were rare and usually resolved through negotiation or brief surgical strikes. He found again, Captain, I must express concern. The odds are not favorable. Was giving orders to multiple people at once but paused to look at directly. I know the odds, but those are our people down there. Human civilians, yes, but also families, merchants, students. The colony is mixed species. We protect everyone under coalition banner. Even at risk to your own forces. His face hardened. Especially then. That's what makes us different from we don't abandon people because the math doesn't work out perfectly. The ship began to move. Could feel the engines building power. Around him, humans prepared for battle with grim determination. Their earlier humor had vanished. They checked weapons with practiced hands. They spoke quietly to each other, words of encouragement and planning. Watched a young human male secure armor plating to his chest. The man's hands were steady, but his jaw was clenched tight. Next to him, another human female loaded ammunition into her weapon with mechanical precision. Her eyes were distant, focused on something only she could see. This was not what he had expected. He had thought humans would show fear or excitement. Instead, they showed something he could not quite identify, something cold and purposeful. His voice came over the ship communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We're heading into a fight. The enemy has numbers on their side. They've hit a colony with civilians. They think we'll calculate the risk and stay back. They're wrong. We're going to show them what happens when you threaten innocent people. We're going to remind them why humanity doesn't back down. Get ready. Felt the ship accelerate toward the planet. Through the viewports, he could see the other coalition vessels moving into formation. They were indeed outnumbered. Any reasonable analysis said this was a poor strategic choice. But as looked around at the human faces surrounding him, he saw no doubt, only determination, only focus, only something that looked almost like hunger. For the first time, wondered if he truly understood his allies at all. The Valiant dropped toward the burning colony and prepared to learn what humans really were when pushed to fight. The landing craft shook violently as it descended through the atmosphere, gripped the safety harness across his chest and tried to control his breathing. Around him, 20 human Marines sat in 2 rows, weapons held ready. Their faces were calm despite the explosions rocking the ship. Lieutenant Amy Brooks stood near the front, one hand on an overhead rail for balance. 2 minutes to touchdown, she called out. Stay sharp. Enemy forces are concentrated around the main residential sector. Our job is to secure an evacuation route and get civilians to the extraction point. One of the Marines, a young male with red hair, looked at. First time in a combat drop, sir. Nodded, not trusting his voice. The Marine smiled slightly. Just stay close to us. We'll keep you safe. The landing craft hit the ground hard. The rear door dropped open and the Marines poured out in a coordinated rush. Followed, stumbling slightly as his feet found dirt instead of metal deck. The scene before him was chaos. Buildings burned on all sides. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of chemicals. In the distance, he could hear weapons fire and screaming. The Marines formed a defensive perimeter around the landing craft without anyone giving orders. They simply knew what to do. Brooks checked a handheld device. Residential sector is 3 blocks east. Let's move. They advanced through streets littered with debris, saw abandoned possessions scattered everywhere. A child's toy lay in the road, one wheel still spinning slowly. His chest tightened at the sight. The first contact came suddenly. Soldiers appeared from behind a collapsed wall, their weapons already firing. The humans reacted instantly. They moved as one unit, finding cover and returning fire with practiced efficiency. Dove behind a concrete barrier, his heart's pounding. The fight lasted less than a minute. When the weapons fell silent, 5 bodies lay in the street. The humans checked each one carefully, making sure they were dead. One Marine took a shallow wound to his arm but simply wrapped it quickly and continued moving. That's how they operate, Brooks said too as they advanced again. Hit fast, no warning. They don't negotiate or take prisoners. They reached the residential sector, and the world changed. Bodies lay in the streets. Civilians who had been caught trying to flee saw among them their blue-tinted skin now pale in death. Humans, all species mixed together in their final moments. Some were very small, children. The Marines stopped. Every single one of them went completely still, watched their faces change. The professional calm cracked and something else emerged, something cold and dangerous. Brooks knelt beside a small human child, no more than 5 or 6 years old by estimate. The child's eyes were open but saw nothing. Brooks reached out with one hand and gently closed those eyes. When she stood, her face was like stone. "Find survivors," she said. Her voice was quiet but cut through the air like a blade. "And find every single in this sector." The Marines split into teams, followed Brooks's group as they moved building to building. They found survivors hiding in basements and damaged structures. Each time, the humans were gentle and reassuring, helping frightened civilians toward the extraction point. But when they encountered soldiers, everything changed. Watched humans become something else. They moved with lethal precision. There was no hesitation, no mercy. They cleared rooms with brutal efficiency. Soldiers who tried to fight were cut down in seconds. Those who tried to run were hunted and eliminated. In one building, they found 3 soldiers standing over a group of civilians. The aliens were preparing to execute their prisoners. Brooks's team entered through 2 different doors simultaneously. The fight was over before could fully process what happened. The 3 were dead. The civilians were safe. One of the rescued civilians was a young human female, maybe 14 years old. She was crying and shaking. Brooks holstered her weapon and knelt beside the girl, speaking softly and checking her for injuries. The same hands that had just killed without hesitation now moved with careful gentleness. Felt something in his mind shift. He had thought he understood warfare. Clean tactics, strategic objectives, minimal casualties, but this was different. This was personal. They continued moving through the sector. The human fleet above had engaged the ships, giving them time to evacuate civilians. But ground resistance remained heavy. Each block required clearing. Each building could hold enemies or survivors or both. In a damaged medical facility, they found a Marine from another unit. Corporal Daniel Hayes had been separated from his team during the initial attack. He was wounded, with burns across his left side and a deep cut on his leg. Dr. Canton, who had accompanied the ground force, immediately moved to treat him. "Corporal Hayes needs evacuation," Canton said after examining him. "These wounds need proper treatment." Hayes shook his head. "No, ma'am, my team is still out there. I can still fight." "You can barely walk," Canton argued. Hayes gripped his weapon. "Then I'll fight from cover. I'm not leaving while there are civilians at risk." Brooks studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You're with us, but you take rear position and you stay in cover. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." Canton looked frustrated but said nothing more. She gave Hayes medication for pain and sealed his wounds as best she could in the field. The corporal stood and took position with the unit. Could not understand this behavior. Hayes was clearly suffering. He could compromise the mission by being unable to move properly, but no one ordered him to evacuate. The other humans simply accepted his choice. They reached the main square where the evacuation point was established. More than 100 civilians huddled together under the guard of Marine units. Landing craft were arriving to take them to the ships in orbit, but forces were closing in from multiple directions, trying to disrupt the evacuation. His voice came through Brooks's communicator. "Lieutenant, we've got enemy reinforcements heading your way. Heavy armor. You need to hold that position for 8 more minutes until all civilians are loaded." "Understood, Captain, we'll hold." The Marines established defensive positions around the square. Found himself pressed behind a barricade, watching as the humans prepared to face superior numbers. They checked ammunition, adjusted positions, and coordinated fields of fire. Some spoke quietly to each other. Heard one young Marine say to another, "If this goes bad, tell my brother I'm sorry I missed his wedding." The other Marine gripped his shoulder. "You'll tell him yourself. We're all walking away from this." The attack came in a wave. Armored vehicles and dozens of soldiers rushed toward the square from 3 directions. The human defense erupted into controlled chaos. Weapons fire filled the air. Explosions shook the ground. Could barely process the speed of events. But the humans held. They fired with deadly accuracy. They moved to reinforce weak points without being told. When one Marine's weapon jammed, another immediately covered his position. Hayes, despite his wounds, destroyed an enemy vehicle with a well-placed explosive charge. A soldier broke through the defensive line and rushed toward the civilians. Brooks intercepted it, engaging in close combat, watched in horror and fascination as she fought the larger alien hand-to-hand. She moved with brutal efficiency, using the enemy's size against it. Within seconds, the was on the ground and Brooks was back in position. The final landing craft lifted off with the last civilians aboard. His voice came through again. "All civilians evacuated. Fall back to your extraction point." The Marines began a fighting retreat, covering each other in pairs. They pressed their advantage, pursuing aggressively, but the humans had timed it perfectly. As the last Marines reached their landing craft, the human fleet above opened fire on the ground positions. The orbital bombardment gave them the cover they needed to escape. Inside the landing craft, the Marines finally relaxed. Some slumped against the walls, exhausted. Others checked equipment or tended minor wounds. Hayes was shaking from pain and stress but alive. Looked around at these humans. They were covered in dirt and blood, some bore injuries. They had just fought through impossible odds and survived, and they looked satisfied. Not happy, but satisfied, like they had done exactly what needed to be done. Brooks caught his gaze. "You all right, officer?" Realized he was trembling. Yes, thank you." She nodded. "Welcome to human ground operations. It only gets more intense from here." As the craft climbed toward orbit, stared at the burning colony below. They had saved hundreds of civilians, but the cost was visible in the exhausted faces around him. And something else bothered him. The humans had fought with such controlled fury. They had killed without hesitation when facing enemies, but shown perfect gentleness with civilians. They had refused to abandon wounded comrades even when tactically questionable. This was not the warfare had studied. This was something primal and terrifying and strangely beautiful all at once. He began to understand that he knew nothing about humans at all. 3 weeks had passed since the colony rescue. 3 weeks of constant fighting across 4 different star systems. had witnessed more combat in those weeks than most saw in their entire military careers. And with each battle, his understanding of humans shifted in disturbing ways. The Valiant had become his home, though it never felt truly comfortable. The ship bore scars from multiple engagements. Burn marks the hull. Several sections were sealed due to damage. But the humans kept fighting, kept pushing forward against the advance. Sat in the command center, reviewing tactical data when Commander Fletcher dropped into the seat beside him. The human officer looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, but his mind remained sharp. "You're analyzing the battle patterns again," Fletcher said, nodding at screen. "They are predictable," replied. "They favor overwhelming force and brutal directness. Standard countertactics should be effective." Fletcher smiled without humor. "Should be, but they keep adapting. See here," he pointed at the data. 2 weeks ago, they always hit the same target types. Now they're varying their approach. Someone is learning from their losses. As are we, noted. The human tactical modifications have been remarkable. It was true. The humans changed their methods almost daily. A tactic that failed in one battle was modified and retested within hours. They had superior numbers, but the humans learned faster. Had never seen any species adapt so quickly. "That's what we do," Fletcher said quietly. "Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. It's in our blood. We learn or we die." Felt uncomfortable with that statement. "Surely your species has known peace." "Some," Fletcher agreed, "but never for long. Earth history is full of conflicts. Different nations, different ideologies, different resources. We fought each other constantly. Sometimes we nearly destroyed ourselves." He pulled up images on his tablet. "These are from our world wars. We killed millions of our own species with bombs and gas and bullets." The images shocked. Human bodies piled in trenches, cities reduced to rubble. "This is your own people." "Yes, we're very good at killing. We've had lots of practice." Fletcher's voice held no pride, only grim acknowledgement. "The galaxy thinks humans are soft because we talk about peace and cooperation. But that's a choice we make every day. The capacity for violence never went away. We just learned to control it." An alarm interrupted them. Captain appeared on the main display, his face serious. "All senior staff to briefing room. We've got new intelligence." Minutes later, sat with the command team around a large table. Stood at the head next to a projection screen. Brooks, Fletcher, Canton, and several other officers were present. The atmosphere was tense. "We've intercepted communications," began. "They've established a primary research facility on an asteroid in the Theta system. The facility appears to be their main base for this sector." "Strategic target," Fletcher said immediately. "If we can take it out, we cripple their operations." His expression darkened. "There's more. The facility is also a prison camp. They're holding captured coalition personnel there. The intelligence suggests they're conducting experiments." The room went completely silent. Saw every human's face change. The exhaustion disappeared, replaced by something cold and hard. "Experiments?" Brooks asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Medical research from what we can determine. They're studying different species to find weaknesses." Pulled up images. Felt sick looking at them. Prison cells, medical equipment, and worst of all, beings restrained on tables. "How many prisoners?" one officer asked. "Unknown, at least 30 confirmed, possibly more." Canton leaned forward. Are our people still alive?" "We believe so. They seem to want them alive for their research." Watched the humans process this information. He expected anger or distress. Instead, he saw something that frightened him more. They became utterly calm, focused, like predators that had just located prey. "We need to plan a rescue operation," Brooks said. "Coalition Command thinks it's too risky," replied. "The base is heavily defended. They recommend a siege approach or waiting for larger fleet support." "How long would that take?" Fletcher asked. "Weeks, maybe months. Brooks stood. Those people don't have weeks. Every day in hands is another day of torture. I agree, said. Which is why I'm volunteering the Valiant and any crew who wants to join. This won't be an official coalition operation. It's a rescue mission. Anyone who wants out can transfer to another ship. Looked around the table. Not a single human moved to leave. We're all in, Captain, Fletcher said simply. Over the next 72 hours, watched the humans plan, and what he saw terrified him more than any battle. The humor was gone. The loud voices and casual touches disappeared. The humans worked with cold efficiency, planning every detail of the assault. They studied intelligence reports, analyzed defensive positions, and calculated acceptable casualties with detached precision. Found himself in the tactical planning room with Fletcher. The commander was reviewing approach vectors when finally spoke. "You're different now," he said, "all of you, since learning about the prisoners." Fletcher didn't look up from his work. "Yes. It's disturbing. You seem more dangerous than the enemy." Now Fletcher did look at him. His eyes were tired but utterly focused. "You're right to be disturbed. You're seeing the other side of humanity, the side we try very hard to keep controlled." "I don't understand." Fletcher set down his tablet. "Humans have two modes most of the time. We're what you've seen before. Loud, emotional, caring. We laugh and argue and make friends. We value life and try to minimize suffering." He paused. "But when someone threatens what we protect, when someone harms the innocent or tortures our people, something else emerges. Something old. Something that remembers when humans were apex predators on a death world." "This is that something," said quietly. "Yes. Right now, we're not thinking about peace or diplomacy or ethics. We're thinking about how to kill efficiently and rescue our people. We've shifted into war mode. And in war mode, humans are very, very good at what we do." Notice that Fletcher included himself in that assessment without pride or shame, simply stating a fact. "Does it frighten you," asked, "what you become?" Fletcher was quiet for a long moment. "Yes, every time. That's why we have rules of war, protocols, ethics training, because we know what we're capable of if we let go completely. The frightening thing isn't that we can be monsters. It's that we have to choose not to be every single day." A message came through Fletcher's communicator. "All teams to briefing room. Final mission planning." The assault plan was ambitious and dangerous. 3 ships would approach the asteroid base. Ground teams would infiltrate while the ships engaged orbital defenses. The timeline was tight and allowed little margin for error. Coalition Command had officially support, meaning they were on their own. Watched Brooks brief her Marine units. The soldiers listened with complete attention. She laid out the plan clearly and honestly, including expected casualty rates. No one flinched at the numbers. "Our objective is simple," Brooks said. "Get our people out. Anything that tries to stop us gets removed." Questions. One Marine raised his hand. "Rules of engagement. Defend yourselves and protect the prisoners. If forces surrender, we'll take them prisoner. If they fight, put them down." Her voice was matter of fact. "This isn't revenge. This is a rescue. Stay focused on the mission." The Marines nodded. Noticed that Brooks had to specify that it wasn't revenge, which meant that some of them needed that reminder. The desire for revenge was there, simmering under the surface. That evening, found on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The captain looked older than his years. "Captain, may I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why risk everything for 30 people? Tactically, it makes little sense. Waiting for support would be safer." Was quiet for a moment. "You're right. Tactically, it's questionable. But humans don't operate on pure tactics. Those 30 people trusted us to protect them. They fought for the coalition and got captured for it. We can't abandon them just because the math doesn't work out. Even if more people die in the rescue. Even then, because if we abandon them, what does that say about us? We'd be no better than the turn to face. You make decisions based on logic and analysis. That's good. That's smart. But humans make decisions based on something else too. We ask ourselves, can we live with this choice? If we left those people to suffer when we could have helped, could we look at ourselves the same way? Understood then. It wasn't about tactics or strategy. It was about human nature, about the values they chose to uphold even when difficult. I've been watching you, continued. You're starting to fear us, I can see it. Couldn't deny it. Yes, you are my allies, but you terrify me now. Nodded slowly. Good. That means you're finally seeing us clearly. Humans are capable of terrible things, but we're also capable of great compassion. The key is we get to choose which one to be. Most species don't have that choice. They're bound by instinct or culture, but humans can be monsters or saints, and we decide which every single day. Which are you right now? Asked. Smiled grimly. Right now, I'm getting ready to be whatever I need to be to get our people home. The fleet moved out the next morning toward the asteroid base, prepared his equipment and tried to calm his racing hearts. He was about to witness humans at their most dangerous. Part of him wanted to stay behind. But another part, the part that needed to understand these strange allies, pushed him forward. As the ships approached the target, looked around at the human crew. They were focused and calm, ready for violence but still maintaining their discipline. He was about to see what humans truly were when nothing held them back. The assault began in silence. The three coalition ships emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the asteroid field. The base hung in the void like a gray tumor against the black of space. Defense platforms surrounded it in a protective shell. Stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching the tactical display. His heart beat rapidly, but the humans around him were eerily calm. They moved through their pre-combat routines with practiced ease. No one spoke unnecessarily. The usual chatter and energy had vanished. All teams ready, Brooks reported from the Marine deployment bay. Her voice came through the communicator with perfect calm. Fleet engaging in 30 seconds, announced. All batteries prepare to fire. The seconds counted down. Gripped the edge of a console, his hands trembling slightly. The humans remained still, watching their screens, fingers poised over controls. Fire. The Valiant and its companion ships opened up with every weapon. The void lit up with energy beams and explosive projectiles. The defense platforms returned fire immediately. The battle became a storm of light and destruction. Guided the ship through the chaos with expert precision. Enemy fire missed by meters as he anticipated each pattern. Fletcher coordinated the fleet attack, finding weak points in the enemy defense and exploiting them ruthlessly. Path is clear, Fletcher announced, sending in the boarding craft. 4 small ships detached from the Valiant and shot toward the asteroid base. They were designed for stealth and speed, not combat. Watched their progress on the tactical display, each heartbeat feeling like an eternity. The boarding craft reached the base and attached to the hull like insects. Cutting torches flared. Within seconds, the Marines breached the outer shell and disappeared inside. We're in, Brooks's voice came through. Minimal resistance at entry point, moving to prisoner section now. Switched his attention to the video feed from Brooks's helmet camera. The view showed narrow corridors and dim lighting. The Marines moved in tight formation, weapons ready. Their movements were fluid and coordinated. They communicated with hand signals and brief words. The first patrol appeared around a corner. The humans engaged instantly. The fight was brutal and short. They fired their weapons, but the Marines were already moving, using cover and crossfire to deadly effect. In less than 5 seconds, the patrol was eliminated. Contact, Brooks reported calmly, as if she had just mentioned the weather. 4 hostiles down, continuing to objective. They moved deeper into the base. More appeared, responding to the alarm. Each encounter followed the same pattern. The humans would spot the enemy, coordinate silently, and execute their attack with lethal precision. There was no hesitation, no mercy, but also no cruelty. They killed efficiently and moved on. Noticed something disturbing. The humans seemed to know exactly where to aim for maximum effect. They had studied anatomy and weaponized that knowledge. Every shot was placed to kill or incapacitate immediately. Approaching prison section, Brooks reported. Heavy resistance ahead. The corridor opened into a larger chamber. Soldiers had established a defensive position blocking the entrance to the prison area. They had proper cover and overlapping fields of fire. It was a strong position. Brooks studied the situation for maybe 3 seconds. Then she gave orders in quick succession. Team Alpha, suppressing fire on my mark. Team Beta, flank left through that access tunnel. Team Charlie, wait for my signal, then breach right. The Marines moved instantly. Alpha Team opened fire, forcing them to stay in cover. Beta Team disappeared into a side passage. Charlie Team prepared breaching charges. Watched the coordination unfold. The humans weren't just following orders. They anticipated each other's movements, adjusting their positions to maximize effectiveness. It was like watching a single organism with multiple limbs. The breach came from 3 directions simultaneously. The defensive position collapsed in seconds. The humans swept through the chamber, eliminating threats with mechanical efficiency. Prison section secured, Brooks announced. Beginning prisoner extraction. The video feed showed cells lining both sides of a long corridor. The Marines moved quickly, using cutting tools to open the locked doors. Beings stumbled out, weak and confused. Saw humans and others. Some could barely walk. Medical teams forward, Brooks ordered. Human medics pushed through, immediately assessing the freed prisoners. Dr. Canton was among them, moving from person to person with quick efficiency. She spoke softly to each one, offering reassurance while checking their condition. One cell held a human male who recognized from the service records. Private Brandon Cole, captured 3 months earlier during a patrol mission. Cole looked terrible. His body showed signs of torture and experimentation. But when the Marines opened his cell, he tried to stand on his own. "Easy, Cole," one Marine said, moving to support him. "We've got you." "My squad?" Cole asked, his voice hoarse. "We'll find them. Right now, we need to get you out of here." Cole shook his head stubbornly. "I can still fight. Give me a weapon." The Marine looked at Brooks, who had approached. She studied Cole for a moment. "Can you walk?" "Yes, ma'am." "Can you shoot?" "Yes, ma'am." Brooks handed him a sidearm. "Stay in the middle of the formation. You're getting out of here alive, Cole. That's an order." Cole nodded, gripping the weapon. Saw tears in the man's eyes, but his hands were steady. The Marines found evidence of the experiments as they cleared the facility. Medical equipment, restraints, and detailed records of procedures performed on prisoners. One Marine stopped to read a data pad, then dropped it like it burned him. "Lieutenant, you need to see this," he said quietly. Brooks scanned the pad. Her face went blank, emotionless. She looked at the other Marines. "Bag all the evidence. Every data pad, every file, every piece of equipment. The galaxy is going to know what happened here." They continued deeper into the facility. In what appeared to be the main research area, they found 3 scientists and 1 military officer. They raised their hands in surrender as the Marines entered. For a long moment, no one moved. Could feel the tension through the video feed. These had tortured prisoners, had conducted cruel experiments. The Marines had every reason to want revenge. Brooks stepped forward. Her voice was cold but controlled. "On the ground, now, hands behind your heads." Quickly, Marines secured them with restraints while others documented the research area. "We're taking prisoners," one Marine asked, surprise in his voice. "We're not them," Brooks said simply. "Tag them for transport, they'll face trial." Felt something shift in his understanding. The humans had every justification for summary execution. No one would have questioned it, but they chose the harder path. They chose to maintain their principles even in this moment. The extraction began. Freed prisoners were moved toward the boarding craft while the Marines maintained a defensive perimeter. Forces tried multiple times to retake the prison section, but each assault was repelled. On the bridge of the Valiant watched the tactical display. They're sending reinforcements from their main fleet. We need those people out now. Fletcher coordinated the evacuation while managing the fleet battle. First boarding craft is away. 30 seconds to second launch. An explosion rocked the asteroid base. The video feeds showed fire and debris in one corridor. We've got structural damage in Section 7, Brooks reported, accelerating evacuation. The Marines moved faster but maintained order. They helped prisoners who couldn't walk, carrying them when necessary. Cole, despite his weakened state, helped support an injured. The last boarding craft detached from the asteroid just as reinforcements arrived. The fleet battle intensified, pushed the Valiant hard, using the ship's bulk to shield the smaller craft during their return. All personnel recovered, Brooks confirmed, returning to the Valiant. Allowed himself a small smile. Good work, Lieutenant. Fleet prepare to disengage. As the coalition ships, Fletcher coordinated one final action. Fire on the facility. Destroy the research equipment and all data storage. The Valiant's weapons targeted the prison section of the base. Explosions tore through the structure, erasing the evidence of what had occurred there. But the data pads and files secured by the Marines would ensure the galaxy knew the truth. Hours later, stood in the medical bay watching Dr. Canton work. She moved between patients with tireless energy, treating physical wounds and speaking gently to help with the psychological trauma. Brandon Cole sat on one bed, his injuries treated and bandaged. He stared at his hands as if not believing he was really free. Lieutenant Brooks entered and sat beside him. She didn't say anything at first, just sat there in silence. Finally, Cole spoke. "They did things," he said quietly. "Experiments, testing our pain tolerance, seeing how much we could endure before breaking." "You're safe now," Brooks said. "I didn't break," Cole continued. "They tried everything, but I didn't give them any information. I just kept thinking about my family, about my unit. I couldn't let them down." Brooks put a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't. You survived. That took more strength than most people have." Watched this interaction and felt his understanding of humans deepen once more. They had fought through impossible odds, maintained their principles in the face of justified rage, and now showed compassion to their traumatized comrades. Captain found him later. "What did you think? Did we measure up to your tactical expectations?" Struggled for words. "You followed the rules even when you didn't have to. You showed mercy to enemies who deserved none." "That's what makes us different from the," said. "We can be violent when necessary. We can fight without mercy when protecting the innocent. But we choose when to stop. We choose to remain civilized even in the worst circumstances. That choice is what defines us." Looked around at the busy medical bay, at the freed prisoners receiving care, at the exhausted Marines who had risked everything for people they didn't know, at the human capacity for both terrible violence and profound compassion existing side by side. He finally understood what truly terrified him about humans. It wasn't their capacity for violence. It was their control over it. The war ended 3 weeks after the prison rescue. The leadership, faced with mounting losses and the public revelation of their experiments, agreed to negotiations. The files recovered from the asteroid base had been distributed throughout the coalition. Public opinion turned decisively against the. Even their few allies abandoned them when the evidence became known. Sat in his quarters aboard the Valiant, preparing his final report to high command. His hands moved across the data pad, trying to put into words what he had witnessed. How could he explain humans to people who had never fought beside them? How could he describe the terror and beauty of watching humanity at war? The door chimed. "Enter" called. Captain Jack stepped inside. The human officer looked better than he had in weeks. The stress lines around his eyes had softened slightly, but noticed new gray in his hair. "Thought I'd check on you before the ceremony," said. "Make sure you were doing all right." "I am completing my report," replied. "It is difficult finding the right words." Sat in the chair across from him. "What's the hardest part to explain?" Was quiet for a moment. "Everything. My people will read my analysis of human combat capabilities and think they understand, but they will miss the essential truth, that humans are not simply effective warriors. You are something far more complex." "Complex how?" "You are terrifying because you can choose to be gentle. You are dangerous because you know exactly how dangerous you are and work constantly to control it." Looked directly at. "When I arrived, I thought humans were primitive allies, useful but unsophisticated. I was wrong in ways I am still processing." Smiled slightly. "We get that a lot. People see us as soft because we value life and pursue peace. They don't realize that valuing something is exactly what makes us fight harder to protect it." "Does it frighten you?" asked. "What you had to do, what you are capable of doing?" Smile faded. "Every day, I replay decisions and wonder if I could have found a better way. The people we lost, the violence we inflicted, it weighs on you." He paused. "But I'd do it all again if necessary, because the alternative was letting innocent people suffer. I can live with the weight of my choices. I couldn't live with the weight of doing nothing." A message came through's communicator. "Captain, ceremony begins in 10 minutes. "On my way," replied. He stood and looked at. "You should come, this is important." The ceremony was held in the main hangar bay. The entire crew assembled in neat rows, dress uniforms perfectly maintained. Representatives from other coalition species stood in designated areas. Took his place among them. The space had been transformed. A memorial wall displayed images of the fallen, humans and others who had died during the conflict. Their faces looked out at the assembled crowd. So many lost, so much sacrifice. Stood at the front, flanked by Brooks and Fletcher. His voice carried clearly through the hangar. "We gather today to honor those who gave everything. They came from different worlds, different backgrounds, different species, but they shared a common purpose. They believed that innocent lives were worth defending, that cruelty must be opposed, that we stand together against those who would harm the weak." Watched the humans as spoke. They stood at attention, eyes forward, but many had tears running down their faces. They grieved openly without shame. "The war is over," continued. "We won, but victory came at tremendous cost. Every name on this wall represents a person with family, with dreams, with a future that was taken from them. We can never repay that debt. All we can do is remember them and strive to be worthy of their sacrifice." The ceremony proceeded with military precision. Names were read aloud. Bells chimed. A moment of silence stretched across the hangar, broken only by quiet weeping. Afterward found himself standing before the memorial wall. He studied the faces, trying to memorize them. These beings had died in service to the coalition. Many had died protecting him and others like him. Lieutenant Amy Brooks appeared beside him. She stood silently for a moment, looking at the wall. "See that one?" She pointed to a young human male with a bright smile. "Private Parker, he was in my squad. Took a direct hit protecting a group of civilian refugees. Died instantly." "I am sorry," said quietly. "So am I." He was 22 years old, had a girlfriend waiting for him back on Earth, wanted to be a teacher after his service ended. Brooks's voice was steady but sad. But he didn't hesitate. Saw those civilians in danger and moved to shield them. That's what humans do. "Is that what makes you terrifying?" asked. "The willingness to die for others?" Brooks considered the question. "Maybe. I think what makes us terrifying is that we're capable of great love and great violence, often at the same time. We fight hardest for what we care about most. Parker loved life so much that he gave his own to protect others. That's the human paradox. Commander Fletcher joined them. He looked at the wall with tired eyes. 43 people from the Valiant alone. 43 families who will get official notifications and folded flags. I calculated every tactical decision that led to those losses. I'll carry that forever. But you would make the same decisions again, said. It was not a question. Yes, because the alternative was losing more people or abandoning those who needed help. Command means choosing between bad options and living with the consequences. Fletcher turned to, that's something else about humans you should understand. We don't believe in clean solutions. We accept that sometimes doing the right thing costs everything. We do it anyway. Dr. Lisa Canton found later in the medical bay. She was organizing supplies, preparing to transfer patients to long-term care facilities. Wanted to say goodbye before you leave, she said. I know you're heading back to space soon. Tomorrow morning, confirmed. I have learned much during my time here, about humans, about war, about myself. Canton smiled. I hope some of what you learned was positive. We're not always fighting and destroying. Most of the time, we're actually pretty decent. I have seen your compassion, assured her. The way you treated everyone equally, enemy and ally, human and alien. You never stopped caring, even when exhausted. That's the balance we try to maintain, Canton said. Yes, humans can be warriors when necessary. We can fight and kill and destroy. But we're also healers, teachers, builders, artists. The violence is a tool we use when we must. It's not who we are at our core. What are you at your core? Canton thought about it. Survivors, protectors. Humans survived on Earth by being tough and adaptable, but we also survived by working together, by caring for each other. Both aspects are essential. The capacity for violence kept us alive. The capacity for compassion made us worth saving. That evening had one final conversation with Brandon Cole. The former prisoner had recovered physically, though his eyes still held shadows. They sat in the observation deck, watching stars drift past. I heard you're writing a report about humans, Cole said, about what makes us effective in combat. Yes, though I struggled to capture the truth completely. Cole was quiet for a moment. What did they do to you in that facility? Asked carefully, if you don't mind me asking. They wanted to understand human pain tolerance, how much we could endure before breaking. They tried drugs, physical torture, psychological manipulation. Cole's voice was flat, emotionless. They couldn't understand why I wouldn't give them information. They thought everyone breaks eventually. Why didn't you? Because I remembered my purpose. I'm a soldier. My job is to protect the coalition and the people it represents. If I had given them tactical information, more people would have died. I couldn't live with that. Cole looked at. That's what you need to understand about humans. We're not fearless. I was terrified every single day in that facility. But we don't let fear control us. We do what needs to be done regardless of the cost to ourselves. Felt pieces of understanding click into place. That is what makes you terrifying. Not the violence or the skill, but the absolute unwillingness to surrender what you believe in. Cole smiled slightly. Maybe. I just know that when things get desperate, humans don't quit. We adapt. We survive. We protect what matters. That's not special or unique. It's just who we are. The next morning, prepared to depart. His transport would take him back to the fleet and eventually home. He stood in the docking bay with his few belongings, waiting for final clearance. The senior officers of the Valiant came to see him off. Brooks, Fletcher, and Canton stood in an informal group. Safe travels, officer said, extending his hand in the human gesture, gripped it firmly. Thank you for serving with us. Your tactical insights were valuable. The honor was mine, Captain. I learned more than I contributed. Brooks stepped forward. If you're ever back in this sector, look us up. You're always welcome on the Valiant. Fletcher handed him a data chip. Tactical analysis of all our major engagements. For your report, Unclassified stuff, but it might help explain our methods. Canton gave him a small wrapped package, medical supplies compatible with physiology, and a bottle of Earth whiskey, for when you need to remember us. Felt unexpected emotion. These humans had become more than allies. They had become something like friends. I will not forget any of you, or what you taught me. The transport lifted off, carrying away from the Valiant. He watched the ship grow smaller through the viewport, but still strong, like the humans themselves. In his quarters on the transport, completed his report. His final summary was direct and honest. Humanity should never be underestimated. They are not the strongest species in physical terms. They lack the advanced technology of older races. They are emotional and sometimes irrational, but they possess qualities that make them uniquely dangerous and uniquely valuable as allies. Humans can endure what would break other species. They adapt faster than any race we have encountered. They will sacrifice themselves for others without hesitation. They can be gentle and brutal, often within the same moment. They value life so deeply that they fight with terrifying intensity to protect it. Most importantly, humans choose their actions consciously. They are capable of great cruelty but actively work to restrain themselves. This self-control makes them more dangerous than pure savagery ever could. They know exactly how destructive they can be and deliberately limit themselves to ethical behavior. My recommendation is clear. Humanity must be treated as equals in all coalition matters. Their military should be respected and their council valued. And under no circumstances should any species ever give humans a reason to view them as enemies. Because fighting alongside humans showed me the true face of terror, and it is staring at beings who are capable of limitless violence but choose mercy, who can destroy absolutely but build instead, who carry the capacity for darkness but walk in the light. The galaxy should be grateful that humans are on our side. Sealed the report and transmitted it to command. Then he opened Canton's gift and poured himself a small glass of Earth whiskey. The liquid burned going down, harsh and strong, like humans themselves. He raised the glass toward the viewport, toward the distant stars where the Valiant continued its patrol. To humanity, he said quietly, may the galaxy never forget what you are capable of, and may you never forget to choose mercy. The whiskey settled warm in his stomach as the transport jumped to faster-than-light speed. Behind him, humanity continued its work, protecting, building, and carrying the weight of their own terrible potential with grace. Had come to study human warfare. He left understanding that the true measure of any species was not their capacity for violence, but their choice not to use it. And in that measure, humanity stood taller than any race he had ever known. That was the face of terror, and it was beautiful,